This video deals with the income elasticity of demand. The question that we now ask is how much the demand for a good changes if incomes rise by 1%. So now, in contrast to the price elasticity of demand, it's not the prices that change, but income that changes. From a mathematical point of view, this means again that we calculate the percentage change in quantity in the numerator divided by the percentage change in income in the denominator. So here we have the discrete case, and again the continuous case is the same, but with the derivative here of quantity and the derivative of income. As the price elasticity of demand, the income elasticity of demand also depends on the characteristics of the underlying good, and we will see this on the next slides when I go through a few examples. Usually the income elasticity of demand is positive, which means that if incomes rise, people typically demand more of the particular goods, but there is an exception, and these are inferior goods. So goods where if incomes rise, you can afford a better good, which is a substitute for the inferior good, and then the demand for the inferior good would go down. But I will say more on this in another chapter. And basically now we can have the following cases. So the income elasticity of demand could be greater than 1, which means that as incomes rise, the demand for the good under consideration rises by more than the percentage change in income. And this would typically be luxury goods that you don't consume when you have a very low income, because then you consume necessary goods. And as soon as incomes rise further and you can afford luxury goods, then as incomes rise further, the demand for luxury goods would rise proportionally by more than income. So that would hold, for example, for restaurant meals or jewelry, and sometimes also cars, basically, although they can also be classified as necessary goods, but for cars the income elasticity of demand also tends to be rather high. The next example here refers to necessary goods. These goods tend to have a lower income elasticity, and between 0 and 1. And these are goods that you need for surviving, such as food, or that are very important, such as energy, shelter, clothing, and so on. In this case, the demand for these goods would not react that much to income changes, because these goods are necessary in the first place, so you would spend your income on them even if your income is low, so you would spend a large share of your income then on these goods. And often they also have a satiation level. So I mean, you don't buy 3 times the food you need when your income raises by 3 times. So in case of these necessary goods, the income elasticity of demand is smaller than 1, and the more necessary the good is, the closer to 0 is the income elasticity. And it depends also, of course, whether there are good substitutes for the particular good under consideration. And the third example here are the inferior goods that I mentioned before, that have an income elasticity of demand that is smaller than 0, so negative, which means that as incomes rise, people consume less of these goods. And that could be, for example, cheap food. So if your incomes rise, you may buy more pricey food that is healthier, and so on and so forth, and then the demand for cheap food would go down. Public transport is also often referred to as an inferior good, because if incomes rise, people can afford cars and so on, and they would not need to be reliant on public transport anymore in a similar way. And all the goods for which the income elasticity of demand is greater than 0, they are called normal goods. So luxury goods and necessary goods would both be normal goods, but not inferior goods. Now we can also illustrate this graphically. So here we would have the quantity demanded on the vertical axis, and here income on the horizontal axis. Then let's draw 2 special cases with a dotted line against which we plot the other cases then. And the first is where the income elasticity of demand is equal to 0. So that would be a flat line here. As incomes rise, demand would not change at all. So that's a special case of a good. So that may be a necessary good that you consume, but you only need to consume, say, 1 unit of it per day or so, and you would buy the good whenever you have an income. But as your income rises, you would not buy more of this good. So that would be then a good with an income elasticity of 0. And here we have a good with a unit income elasticity. So when prices change by 1%, then demand of the good also changes by 1%. So that would be along the 45-degree line here. Now this line here in purple displays then the demand for a luxury good depending on income. So as incomes are low, people would not consume the luxury good whatsoever. So you have to spend your income on food, on clothing, on shelter, on energy, and so on and so forth. So you cannot afford jewelry and so on. But soon as your income rises above a certain threshold level, you may have your basic needs fulfilled, and you may start to spend additional income on luxury goods. And then the demand would rise for luxury goods even faster than income rises. So if the percentage change in income is 1, then the demand for luxury goods may rise by more than 1. That's the characteristic. So therefore, this line here that displays demand as a function of income would be rather steep for luxury goods. For necessary goods, by contrast, the slope would be rather flat, and you may have a positive intercept here, so that even if you have no income, you need to eat something. So you would spend something on food even without income. You may need to borrow, you may depend on your parents or whatever, but you definitely need to eat. So there would be a positive intercept. But as incomes rise, additional income would not rise by the same amount in percentage terms because there is a satiation level. So that would be the case for a necessary good where the income elasticity of demand is smaller than 1. And for inferior goods, the price elasticity of demand is negative. And in this case, the line for inferior goods would be downward sloping here in the graph that plots the quantity on the vertical axis and income on the horizontal axis. So now we've seen the 3 possibilities for the income elasticity of demand for luxury goods, necessary goods, and inferior goods. And this slide here is a comment that shows that, again, as with the price elasticity of demand, we can rewrite the income elasticity of demand if we multiply out this term here. So then we would get income over the demand level multiplied by the change in quantity that is induced by a change in income. And this can also be done for the continuous case. When we multiply this out, we get again income divided by the demand level, the quantity, and then the partial derivative of the quantity with respect to income. And again, that's the same as if we had the logarithm of quantity and the logarithm of income, and we would take the derivative of the log of quantity with respect to the log of income. That's also the same as this expression here. It's also an elasticity, and it comes in handy quite often when you do empirical analysis of these elasticities, where you are working often with logarithmic data. So if you have the logarithm on the left hand side of the regression and the logarithm on the right hand side, then the coefficient estimate of the corresponding regression and of the corresponding parameter here, if you regress quantity on income, would directly be interpreted as the income elasticity of demand. So we can summarize what we've learned here, that the income elasticity of demand measures the change in demand in response to a 1% change in income. It is typically positive for normal goods, which are luxury goods and necessary goods, but luxury goods have an income elasticity above 1 and necessary goods below 1, but still positive, while the income elasticity of demand is negative for inferior goods. So again, the characteristics of the good determine its elasticity, and also, of course, whether there are good substitutes and so on. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I hope you found it interesting and useful. For more videos on economic content, please visit my channel that you find here to the left. And to the right, you see the next video in the series at the top, and at the bottom, you see the whole lecture in the form of a playlist.